City Circus, community created here on Shaw TV. I'm your host, Marty Gold. As regular viewers of this program know, we have spent a lot of time documenting the erosion of competence within the provincial NDP government, coming to a head last week as our episode explained what had led up to the rise of the Gang of Five. In fact, as that episode was airing last week, the Gang of Five was taking the proverbial walk, but if you read the Black Rod blog, for instance, there are others out there who believe this is all a charade, this is all a setup, because there's no real political end game when you say, well, we're not going to stay in cabinet, we're still going to stay in the caucus, we're still going to support the premier, we're still going to vote NDP, we're still going to run for the NDP, but we don't like what he's doing to you, the taxpayer. So it's sort of like being against him, except still being for him. Well, be that as it may. Review of the facts, first of all. As we go over to the illustration board, you'll see Cash Cow with the Poppy paying tribute to our veterans this week. Previous episodes, podcasts of the Great Canadian Talk Show, and blog posts on current affairs, all available on citycircus.ca. And on Twitter, you can follow our various comments at TGCTS, the acronym for the Great Canadian Talk Show. That's how we got in this deal, and it's certainly been an interesting adventure. Andrew Coyne, the National Post, providing us with some lead-off material. Dissenters may try to dislodge Manitoba Premier Greg Selinger, but it won't be easy. This, of course, last week, November the 3rd. Usually doesn't come to this. When there's a matter of dispute between ministers, one side or the other gives way, but sometimes it's unavoidable, the split, he means, when principle is at stake. In this case, the principle is the government is 15 points behind in the polls. They were quite clear about their motive in the days after the split. The party can't win the next election with Selinger as leader. The Gang of Five would be in a stronger position, principle-wise, if they'd resigned the day the tax increase was announced, rather than waiting 18 months to see which way the wind was blowing. All of them voted for the bill. Some have lately tried to suggest, without saying it, that they opposed it privately. How convenient. Now, that's perspective of somebody, and Coyne has ties to Manitoba. If I'm remembering correctly, he was raised here in Winnipeg for a period of time. That's perspective of somebody from the outside looking in. One of the problems that comes up in Winnipeg from time to time is when you have the navel-gazers, the people that are so anxious to coddle those in the positions of power, those who want to be seated next to them at the fancy dinners and to give them awards and to get their awards, etc., where they really can't see past the end of their own nose. Case in point, the op-ed in the Free Press on the 4th of November, maybe it's time for a female premier, by Shannon Sampert. Her leadoff is Premier Greg Selinger may have a problem with women. The so-called Gang of Five, calling for the resignation of Selinger, is made up of 3 strong women. You know how many times, you remember how many times I've mocked the concept of the strong women of the NDP caucus? Well, here she is reiterating that these people that were essentially weaklings in the face of tyranny, in the face of bullying, in the face of imposing his will, that suddenly they're strong women. In this case, Jennifer Howard, Teresa Oswald, and Aaron Selby. Joined, of course, by Swan and Struthers. But make no mistake, it's the women who are running the show, with Oswald firmly in control. How does Shannon Sampert know that? And how does she come to that conclusion? Because Jennifer Howard is the one that really ran that press conference, not Oswald. But I digress. That's not the only thing that Sampert said in this op-ed piece that was dubious in nature. Jennifer Howard, she said, has held an important position as finance minister. She replaced Roseanne Wojcik. Does anybody here remember Stan Struthers? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, that's right. He was the finance minister that was... But don't let the facts get in the way of feminist diatribe. The remaining 4 women in cabinet... it's not again. No, there's not 4 women in cabinet. If I'm remembering correctly, there's 6. But again, don't let the facts get in the way of the thesis here. Hardly hold high-profile portfolios, although Carrie Irvin Ross is to be given credit for taking on a huge workload in the shuffle. Okay, you're the most incompetent minister who can't keep track of children at risk. You stand by the premier who doesn't have the guts to fire you. You end up getting even more responsibility with the Ministry of Housing, and somehow in Shannon Sampert's world, Carrie Irvin Ross deserves credit for something. Unfathomable. Might I add, isn't the new Minister of Health a woman, right? Lady? I guess that's not considered a high-profile portfolio anymore. In the world of Shannon Sampert, academic turned editorialist. It's doubtful Selinger will be able to rebound from this. And here's the conclusion. Perhaps it's time to let a woman take over. So look, her lead, perhaps Selinger may have a problem with women. And this was much longer. I've abridged this piece considerably. Her conclusion. So she had an idea for an opening statement, had a conclusion, and then filled the rest with so many non sequiturs, so much illogic and factual errors. Well, you know what? Don't leave it up to me. Let's check it out through the eyes of the readers of the Winnipeg Free Press broadsheet newspaper. Comment from somebody whose ends in 0082. Are you suggesting men are not competent enough to be premier? That's both sexist and wrong. Shame on you. It's time for a competent person, male or female, to take over, both as premier and your column. Squonk, our weekly dose of feminist rubbish. I'm getting more than a bit sick of this. Grow up. 2365-2962 saying, the fact that the three female cabinet ministers discussed were completely incompetent considerably weakens the overall argument. I could care less if our premier is male or female. I do, however, want them to be intelligent and qualified. This commenter, another numbered commenter, what a ridiculous headline. Gender has nothing to do with being a good leader for the province. Everybody up commenting, no, it's not. It's time for the best person for the job to be premier, period. If qualifications not important, then in the interest of fairness, we should have a lottery to see who the premier and MLAs would be. Honestly, if I were a female politician, I'd be insulted if you gave the job to me because I was a woman. I'd never feel I truly earned it. I could take no joy in having the position. Leading to our Focal Point optician moment of vision, focalpoint.ca, located over on the U of M campus. The focus coming from the final three commenters on the Free Press website to this op-ed mess of Shannon Sampert. If a qualified goldfish were in the running, I'd vote for the goldfish. Affirmative action, which is really what this column is all about, is insulting and infuriating. Raylan Givens saying, I guess when you use the words bitter and angry when questioning Ms. Sampert's attitude, it's enough to get your comment nuked by the Free Press censors. And finally, P-Track. All five of those turncoats are opportunistic, fair-weather politicians. I would not trust one of them ever again. To say that any of them deserve the public trust is stupid, and the theme of this article knocks the women's movement back 40 years. How on earth did she get a column? So you see the disconnect between the readers of the Free Press, between the taxpayers, the voters, you people out there, and the high and mighty in their editorial perch, who believe that they believe the left, and the far left is actually somewhere in the middle, which it isn't, and who believe that somehow feminism is at the root of the uprising, and somehow feminism will solve it, when in fact everybody who commented on it pretty much agreed what's going to solve it is competence, trustworthiness, honesty, and a capacity to lead by actually listening to people and not redefining the word listening to people as Premier Selinger has as, well, it goes in one ear, out the other, and I still say whatever I want and I impose my will on cabinet. When we return from this break, very special guest right here in the studio. Stay tuned.
Shaw TV proudly presents Live and Local at the Winnipeg Santa Claus Parade, brought to you by Manitoba Hydro, Power Smart. Join us for all the fun with Shaw TV's Tracy Koga and Global's Mike Conkin live from downtown Winnipeg on Saturday, November 15th, starting at 5:15 p.m. The Winnipeg Santa Claus Parade, brought to you by Manitoba Hydro, Power Smart.
Welcome back to City Circus. I am very pleased to welcome back yet another member of the new City Council, and one who, as I've learned, is also a fan of this program going way back, Russ Wyatt, the Macher from Transcona. There's a word you probably don't hear in Transcona very often. No. Jewish cemetery out there, but not a lot of Jewish voters.
No, that's true. Yeah, and a very old Jewish cemetery as well. Yeah,
and hopefully that's not where these programs are going to end up by the time I'm done. You know, a lot of people think, because I've been around for a fair amount of time in terms of doing broadcasting and covering civics, that you and I go way back. But in fact, the first time I really had anything to do with you was when I made a speech in the last couple of years, because I went back to making speeches at City Hall, and I don't remember if it was on governance issues or on the parking authority, whatever it was. And I went back up to the gallery, and I was sitting beside Dave Sauer or somebody like that, and you look up, you're going to go get a coffee in behind where the speaker is, and you looked up at me, and Russ, give me one of these. So whatever I said that day had some effect because you liked it. It was the first time there had ever been any interaction. And I was happy as hell because whatever populist point of view I put forward was found to be a welcome sign of advice to council that day. I really wish I could remember what it was.
I think you were talking about, at the time, it was the consultation or lack thereof in terms of the
bike lanes. Right on.
Assiniboine and
sure.
Just the level of frustration that you hit the nail on the head, right?
We'll be talking about audits shortly. First, I want to get to some of the perfunctory stuff. Sure. Your re-election, which surprised people only insofar as at first you weren't going to run and then you did.
Right.
And I don't want to dwell too much on that decision because I view you with your experience as an asset to any legislative body that you might belong to, voted into democratically. But you made the decision to run again. You ran a campaign against an opponent who had some traction in the riding and made you have to get out and see the people. And this leads me to the question of what the public mood was like when you were door knocking, particularly in your riding in Transcona.
You know, there was a lot of interest and focus on the mayoralty race on the doorstep. That's what I heard over and over again. People were happy, more than many who came forward and said, "We're glad you changed your mind. We like voting for you as a city councilor. We wouldn't have voted for you as a Liberal." but you know, that's but if I heard it once, I heard it about 24 times, without exaggerating. And so that's always nice to hear. And you know, good feedback. Unfortunately, you know, we ran a very positive campaign. I ran on my record, and we were up against an opponent who chose not to run positive. It was kind of with Facebook and with the backing of QP, the union. The flyers that were sent out were very negative. Misinformation, bold-faced lies put on the doorstep to residents so you had to spend some time to explain and to actually put the facts out there. So, you know, that was a big part of it, but otherwise it was a positive feedback on the doorstep. People appreciate the work being done and want to see it continue to be done.
Well, the public mood, though, is certainly the aspect of governance, which, you know, right now is front and center with the minds of all taxpayers.
Right.
Both whether they're wearing their City of Winnipeg hat, taxpayers' own one, or the province of Manitoba hat. We've seen the criticism of Premier Sellinger being essentially what appears to be a top-down kind of leader and the central command kind of model. And a lot of people feel that Mayor Cates, through the administration, was operating in very much the same manner, and you were, you know, very famous for being in and out of EBC.
Absolutely.
A bit of a revolving door around you, but to a lot of people, and this is what I heard, as you know, since you watched the program, got 5 of the 6 major candidates for mayor through here, and got a lot of feedback from voters as I was out in the community. And there was a sense of what Council City Hall had evolved to, not Council, don't want to include you in it, was like a potentate with these political mandarins who were pulling the strings and working behind the scenes to, you know, really, you know, just short of using a blackjack on councillors to get what they wanted, pushed through council. And people seem to have become fed up with that kind of governance. And they wanted a change at City Hall, not just the mayor's chair, but we've seen some of the council seats as well. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that aspect of people feeling that there's not been enough collaboration with the public and too much political agendas. When, you know, people get elected and they change, especially when they're in charge, whether it's the premier or the mayor, they go from being collaborative to being dictatorial almost.
Well, yeah, I have two thoughts on that. First of all, the public rightfully want results, right? They want to get results. They want to get things done. When the system is working, which has from time to time it did in the past, and you have the strong mayor model, as we call it, and the mayor is delivering on results, and there's no other issues that are causing distractions and causing concerns, the public, they don't focus in on the process as much and there's not as much concern. However, when it's not working and you have problems arising, then it definitely highlights the type of system we have. So what you're seeing now, for example, inside the Manitoba legislature, the same sort of thing happening there. We have a country, in my view, we have right at the municipal, in case of Winnipeg, the municipal level, provincially and federally, we don't have many checks and balances in terms of our governments. We have executive branches, which we've given huge amounts of powers to, and the legislative branch, or a check and balance, like you see in other countries, doesn't seem to really exist. And so, the ability, for example, years ago, the ability, council had the ability to elect executive policy committee. I think that made a huge difference, only because it balanced the power a little bit in terms of the mayor's office. The mayor will always have a certain amount of power because the mayor is the only member of council elected at large.
So there has to be
a legitimacy. They'll be able to take cases forward. And to be quite frank with you, I think EPC is really a leftover from the days of Unicity. When we created Unicity in 1972, the council was 50 members.
I remember.
And then they went down to 29. Now, so they needed a coordinating body. They needed a committee to coordinate that, and so they created the Executive Policy Committee. But now we're a council of 16, including the mayor. We're smaller than the provincial cabinet. The question is, do you really need an executive committee? It will be more work to get all of council together, but this mayor seems to be prepared to do that. Other councils do it, where they sit down, they work together, they lock themselves up for weekends at a time until they come out with a budget that is done. They do it together, and there's less acrimony. So, we have this system that we have in place that's very much a command and control model based on one person, and that's, in this case, the mayor, right? And that looks like that might continue for a little longer.
In the past, in my incarnation in radio, which I know you also remember fondly.
Yes. I remember being in the studio with you.
We came across a number of instances, and in particular, to name names, Jeff Brawadi was the first person that mentioned it, but I've heard it from Paul Havixbeck and John Orlico as well, where for the first year, a rookie councillor is really put together almost like by used car salesmen in terms of the administration in City Hall, feeding them some of the information they want them to know to make sure that there's a certain desired result when it comes to raising their hand on a particular issue. What is the learning curve? Do you anticipate the learning curve for the new councillors? Like, for instance, Matt Allard we had in the studio, and I know you saw that interview. What kind of a learning curve do those councillors face nowadays, the rookies, as it were, in terms of being able to sniff out when they're being put together by the administration, as opposed to when they're given, straightforward information that they can deal with and make an objective assessment of whether they're going to support or oppose a particular bylaw or motion or initiative?
Well, it's a huge learning curve. They have a massive amount of information coming their way right at the beginning. As well, being new members of council, the public, many members of the public will be contacting them with issues that they feel that they'll be able to address because they are new in their wards and outside of their wards. And on top of that, the public service coming forward. And as well, then you have the issues that are ongoing, that have been going on in their ward for years, and development taking place that they have to deal with. They learn on the run, and they have to move quickly, and they have to, and it is really, I've always said when it comes to council, each councillor gets to the dance on their own, and they stay on the dance on their own, right? So
now, part of that learning curve where the prior administration seems to have taken advantage of the council, certain councillors in particular, resulted in audits. And now the RCMP being involved. And the phrase was said over and over again, how council was dysfunctional. Whether it was the cop shop, which I know is one of your favorites, supplanted perhaps only by fire stations built on land the city doesn't own, which is one of the best speeches I've ever seen at City Hall was the one you gave that day. Comparing us to whatever burg it is smart enough to own the land their brand new shiny fire station is on. How is this dysfunction of council going to be adjusted, in your point of view, in the upcoming 4 years? Is it just a matter of replacing one of the administrators or a couple of administrators, or do all of the bobbleheads that stood at that press conference and tried to tell Bartley Kivas and Sean Kavanagh everything's kosher, everything's fine? Do all the bobbleheads have to go?
Marty, I think when I met with the mayor last weekend, I gave him a number of points of view and advice, I guess. I think one of the crucial things that we have to do as a council, and it's not something that he, years from now he'll be able to point to and use on a campaign trail because it's not as exciting and sexy as some other things are. But one of the most important things that this mayor and this council must do is rebuild the public service, a professional, qualified public service. We have now departments where there is no performance evaluations that take place of employees, no reviews. The system has been allowed to become political, and we have to start right at the top. The CAO position, it has to start from there. We are a committee-based system, unlike the provincial government or the federal government, where it's a parliamentary system. We're a committee-based system where basically we give direction, we set budgets, and then the public service is to implement.
And they have to deliver.
And deliver. Right? We're not supposed to be micromanaging. We're not supposed to be doing the actual implementation, which a lot of times we've been having to step in because of the chaos on that side. We need to end that, and that comes by having strong, qualified CAO and department heads. I think there's a lot of changes that do need to be made to answer your question. So, but that's not going to happen overnight. But at the same time, the work has to start now. Like it has to start immediately, because we don't have a strong municipal government if we don't have a strong functioning public service, and that's what we're faced with right now. And there are, unfortunately, I think, other time bombs from the past that are still ticking.
Pension liability?
That are still pension liability. I don't think we're out of the police headquarters weeds at all, from what I understand. They're coming forward, and so it's going to have to be dealt with by this new mayor and council.
One of my favorite quotes from you in the past was how you take any infrastructure project, any mega project in the city of Winnipeg, whatever the cost is of the public service of the day, attached to it, add 30%.
Yeah.
BRT is another example of something that's very pie in the sky. It's like talking about unicorns. There's no federal funding attached, no provincial funding attached, and yet there are a number of people who were elected on the basis of talking about BRT. I realize it's tricky because one of the proposed BRT lines, in my point of view, if it was affordable and could be done, to go out towards your ward makes a ton of sense. And to me makes more sense than any of the other discussions that have taken place about new directions for a BRT or an LRT to go, for rapid transit to go. But how are you as a councillor going to be able to stick up for the taxpayer when these numbers are huge? They're going to be 30% huger, and on top of that, there's no commitment from other levels of government, and the city just does not have your wallets are not aren't exactly bottomless.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
How are you going to watch out for the taxpayer on those kinds of projects?
Well, the first thing that needs to happen, for example, the BRT line that's been proposed, I didn't support when it came to council this summer. And one of the key reasons why I didn't was because of what you just said. As far as I'm concerned, the Southwest BRT is the version of a modern-day Trojan horse. It was devised by the former CAO, called the Integrated Capital Plan, where you throw everything in.
Threw in the sewer, and the reconstruction
Jubilee,
and the next thing you know,
it's $600+ million,
and goes through Parker Lands.
Right, and we were told the dog leg was supposed to be more cost effective, and then when they actually ran the numbers, now all of a sudden we're moving the CNR main line into somebody else's private land that we're now going to have to acquire, the same person who we are actually trying to acquire our fire halls from through expropriation. So you know what? All these things are coming together, and you're saying, well, hold on, just put on the brakes. What's the purpose here? Are we building BRT? If we're building BRT, let's build it. We don't need to do the sewer, the water, to drain 2 lanes, $50-60 million to drain 2 lanes of a roadway. It's ridiculous. We don't need to do all this complicated rail work. Let's just build the direct line to serve the university and get on. Now, if we did that, we could do it as a P3 where you get the private sector involved, where you then have a level of comfort in terms of the delivery, in terms of the pricing, because that's where we have had success, and we have had success in the past. It's not talked about as much because it's not as controversial, but I'll give you the Disraeli Bridge. The Disraeli Bridge, it was a very complicated project, but we got the private sector involved. They led the project, and it came on time, on budget, and we were able to keep that bridge operating well open during the whole process. Chief Peguis Trail, the extension from Henderson Last
That's a beaut.
Same thing, and so where you have the private sector, the new mayor has talked about it, and I think it's a great idea. For the underpass we're building in Transcona, we have a penalty bonus clause in place with PCL. So if PCL is finished by September the 1st of next year, which is their deadline date, they will receive for every day prior to September the 1st a $10,000 bonus. If they are late after September the 1st, they will be penalized by another $10,000 until it's open. So there is a bonus penalty clause in place, and these are the sorts of things that we need to do more.
Incentives to make sure that things run on time.
A carrot and a stick.
Yeah. Were you ever on Reach for the Top?
No.
I was. I wasn't assigned for the short snappers, and I got 2 minutes, so I need some fast answers here.
Sure, shoot.
One of our ideas in terms of enhancing public consultation, enhancing people's trust in government, the resurrection of some form of the resident advisory groups. Matt Allard, councillor from St. Boniface, said he was interested in this concept and believed it should be expanded to other neighborhoods. He wants to do it in St. Boniface. Your sense of that, is that something you'd look towards doing? Get more people involved in the discussion process?
I think there's a lot of opportunities with social media now to actually do some very interesting things with town halls and online. A lot of folks, they just coming and attending a meeting in the evening. It's one of those things that's tough to get folks involved. I think if you can do something online to engage the public. I'm excited about the mayor's engagement, Office of Engagement. I hope that it's there to support all members of council as well.
The reduction of in-camera meetings, all these secret meetings that have been foisted upon councillors. I know that it wasn't necessarily a councillor's choice. Allard told us that he's inclined to try to reduce those to a bare minimum. Are you similarly inclined?
The biggest in-camera problem are meetings that take place now are not so much even any of the standing committees. Our council never meets in camera as a city. It really is EPC. So it's a question really to ask members of EPC and the mayor, will you...
Well, that's what I was hoping to do, but it didn't turn out that way. Another idea that we've raised on this program, we saw, you referenced at the beginning of the show, the dissatisfaction with some of the way active transportation was rolled out, the Assiniboine bike lane fiasco, the initiation of a driver's advocate, so the driver's voices are also heard. Is that something you'd be in favor of?
Absolutely.
And also, last question, the taxi cab code and regulation, 3 different ministers have had the portfolio, and you still can't get a cab at Winnipeg on the weekends. Would you support the City of Winnipeg retaking control of taxi regulation, opening the quota, getting more cabs on the roads in the city, and improving public service that way?
Well, I think the provincial government is the one that actually has to regulate, you're right. There's a huge issue there in terms of them actually doing it. You have Uber who's going to city after city in North America. It's a matter of time before they come to Winnipeg.
They're just advertising for drivers last week.
And so the provincial government's going to have to face that challenge when you have a cab license that's now surpassed $500,000 because of the control in the market.
Time to change.
Yeah.
The voice of Russ Wyatt, heard here on the program on City Circus. Russ, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching, and thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with more City Circus. Remember, you have the power.
It's over.